you all for joining us. Welcome to a webinar on exploring the enhanced iPlatform. Today's discussion is for the public, for folks anywhere out there in New Hampshire, or even not in New Hampshire. Maybe you're thinking about moving to New Hampshire, but a chance to learn about iPlatform and how it's a tool that hopefully can give you some information about schools and how the school systems are doing in New Hampshire. My name is Mike Schwartz. I'm here with Lauren Mercier. Hey, Lauren. And Dina Raybuck is also one of the key folks. She's not with us tonight, but I'll mention her in the next slide. There are three of us that I just mentioned who are involved with these training presentations. Dina in particular actually is the mastermind behind iPlatform. She is both an IT developer as well as a education specialist. She has great amount of experience, both understanding education and data that's involved with education with schools and students, as well as a wonderful command of technologies. And Dina is one of the things that I'll mention is that this iPlatform system that you're going to see is a system that was originally developed for the Department of Education a few years ago by a third party, but now has actually been brought into the department. And what that means is that the department has control and the ability to expand it and add to it. So one of the things that we hope is that through these trainings that we'll also get your feedback and you'll provide thoughts about how we might be able to improve iPlatform. Dina has the team and the skills to make that happen, and she's constantly requesting that type of feedback. So we look forward to anything you have to say. Lauren, why don't you introduce yourself real quick?
Sure. My name is Lauren Mercier, and I'm coming from public school setting, and I spent 17 years there as a classroom teacher, school counselor, and administrator. So I'm enjoying learning this side of things, training and working with educators in this capacity, and also working with parents as well as we deliver some of these trainings for parents in the general community. Great.
Thanks. So Lauren is going to be helping out with these trainings and these presentations, and a great resource for iPlatform as well. And then I have been working with the Department of Education. Originally, I was going to work for the department for about 6 months. It's now been about 20 years. So I've been with the department for quite some time, helping a lot with the data and technology initiatives for the department. So I look forward to telling you about iPlatform today. One logistics I should mention, so these are recorded and we're going to hopefully be able to share them with other folks. So please, if you visited today and it's helpful and you want to share it with your friends, point them to the iPlatform training site where these links to these trainings will be, as well as recordings. In terms of the format, we'll be presenting, I'm going to present some slides. We're going to go live and take a look at iPlatform live. We certainly welcome feedback throughout this. So if you've got any questions, feel free to enter them in the Q&A on your toolbar for this Zoom session. There should be a Q&A section where you can enter in questions, and Lauren will help monitor those if we get any questions. So please feel free to ask them. There are kind of 4 topics that we'll talk about. One is just telling you kind of an overview. What is this about? Why is iPlatform created? Kind of what's the intent? And we'll take a look through some slides at what iPlatform looks like, just to kind of give you some content. And then we will also do a live demo for iPlatform, where we'll actually go into the tool and then talk finally a little bit about what's coming next in iPlatform. Lauren, I don't know if you can at some point, but maybe go to the Google Drive and grab the link to this presentation and put it in the chat.
Sure, I'll do that right now.
Great. So this presentation there'll be a link in the chat in the Zoom session. So if you want to get this presentation to kind of refer back to things, you'll have it at your fingertips. So that's what we're doing. I suspect it'll take somewhere around 40 minutes. If I'm good, it might take a little longer if I'm not, but then we'll give you some time for any other questions or to walk through some items as well. And there's a lot of content, so I'm going to go fairly quickly. But again, you can always refer back to the recording. And one of the things about iPlatform that you'll see is that it's a reporting tool. And typically when you're talking about reporting tools, what it means is that this reporting information, you can't really break it. It's just reporting things. It's not like we're collecting data. So please go around and play in it. It's strictly, you can't break it. It's a way to run different reports. You may find you're not sure how to do something, you've got questions about it, please ask us. But know it's a tool that you can just play in and hopefully find some good information. And so hopefully today we'll give you an introduction to kind of get you started in that playing. In terms of what iPlatform is, so really what the state and kind of led by the Commissioner of Education, the Commissioner, one of his main goals or one of his top objectives was to help make the education system in New Hampshire more transparent to all stakeholders. He's very much a believer in sharing data about how schools are doing will only help improve schools. And so the concept of iPlatform was to take lots and lots of data that's collected from the department. The department's been collecting data for years, for the past, at least handful of years, 5-10 years, on student performance, on school performance, on things like attendance and absences and suspension information, and information about assessments, how students are doing assessments. This information is clearly, and I hope it's very obvious, is not available or presented at any student level. And I should also mention that all the data, even at the department, is secure, so it's only with a student ID. We don't even track student names with the data. So the data and the data, what's reported is strictly at the aggregate level. So you're only seeing total counts of students. So none of this data compromises, individual student privacy requirements, and is intended to give you aggregate summary data about how schools are doing, not about individual students. But there's lots of data that's been collected, and all of this data, it's hard to make sense of it all if you just have lots and lots of data. And so the purpose of iPlatform is to help make sense out of that data. So it provides you with different views to look at some summary information. How many students are in these schools? What schools have larger portions of students who might be in high poverty, so they're receiving free and reduced lunch, for example. What schools are paying their teachers more, which schools are paying teachers less on average. So all that type of information which is contained in the departments in these data, and the data the department is all put together in a way that it's hopefully understandable. The components of iPlatform, there are really two main components. There is what's called iReport, which is kind of like a report card, just like it says. It's like a report card like you might get for your student if you've got a child in school. This is a report card about the school. So overall, looking at the school, what's the profile about the school? How many males are there? How many females are there in the school? What's the population? Where is the school in the state? There is information about achievement. So of all the kids in the school, how many of them are able to be identified in what's called proficient within their assessment test for the state? So proficient in math or proficient in English. And that's measured by a state assessment test that's given to all students in the state in grades 3 through 8, and also in grade 11. There's also information about finance. There's information about college and career and where students are going after they finish high school. So all that information is part of the report card that reports about schools or about districts. And then the second main component of iPlatform is called iExplore. And Explore lets you do just what it says. You can explore different pieces of data. So rather than looking at one school, we take a look at a factor, maybe it's class size. How many students are on average are in each class within a school. And look at that class size, that average class size across all schools in the state. So rather than looking at a report card of one school or one district, you're looking at an indicator like class size across all schools in the state. And the other thing it lets you do is compare that information, compare different pieces of information. So is there a relationship, is there a correlation between class size and student achievement? What percentage of students are proficient in math or ELA? So that's the type of question that you'd be able to get some insight into through iExplore. And we'll take a look at that when we get to it. Okay, so that's an overview of what iPlatform is. Let's actually take a look at what the tool looks like when you go onto the website. Before I do that, Lauren, is there any questions or anything I missed that you want to mention?
No, I think you're off to a good start, Mike. No questions so far.
Okay, great. So let's take a look at what iPlatform looks like. So the way you get to iPlatform, the easiest way is go to Google or your favorite search engine, type in NH DOE iPlatform, and you should probably, the top link, I suspect, will be a link to iPlatform. If for some reason doesn't come up right away, you can always go to the department's website, and this is the long link, but you can see a link to it right on the department's website. Once you get to the main landing page on the department's website for iPlatform, you'll see something called iReport, which I just talked about, and iExplore, and that's how you launch those two applications. As I mentioned before, this is all public data. It's not student, nothing's about individual students. As a result, there's no login. So you don't have to log into the system. You can just go there and peruse it, as you wish. When you click, if I just back up a screen actually, when you click on iReport, I mentioned it's a report card about a school or district. So the first page that comes up for these school or district report cards is asking you what school or what district you want to look at. And so the first thing you do is maybe you can search. Maybe you're moving into New Hampshire. You know you want to live in the North Country of New Hampshire, or you know you want to live in a certain town. Maybe you want to live in Conway. You could select Conway and then see a list of the schools, and you could view the report card for any one of those schools or for the district. If you want to look, when you then do that, it'll bring you to the first page of iReport, which is that profile, that overview of the district. Here we're looking at Manchester. We can see the number of students. We can see where Manchester is in the map of New Hampshire. And so it's that profile. And then those things that I said we collect or we got pulled together about each school in the report card, those are tabs at the top of the screen. So you'll see an overview tab, an achievement tab, an environment tab. These tell you, each one of these tabs lets you drill down to the information about that school or that district. iExplore, when you launch that, it brings you to this screen. And this screen, similar to iReport, has multiple tabs. And each tab lets you explore in a different way. iExplore, or the main Explore tab, lets you explore factors like I mentioned earlier. Here we're looking at average cost per pupil. So how much does each town or each district in the state pay per on average per pupil, per student? And it lets you actually look at that data compared to something else. And I'll explain that in more detail. And then there's some other tabs, and we'll go through all of those to get an idea of what each one of the tabs do in iExplore. Okay, for those of you who might have seen iExplore iReport before, I'll just point out some enhancements that are in place now. There's some improved integration between iReport and iExplore. So maybe you're examining a school and you're looking at some information. Maybe it's about the percentage of students are proficient in English, and you want to look at, well, what does that percentage of students look like across the state? You can jump right from iExplore right into iExplore, from iReport to iExplore, and we'll take a look at where you would do that. There's some hover pop-ups. So when you hover over fields, when you put your mouse over certain fields, things will pop up and give you more details about that. A lot of that, frequently that's about longitudinal data. So maybe you're looking at proficiency of students and pop up, you can see over the past 3 years, what's that look like? And again, we'll look at some of that. There's the ability to download data. So if you want to download some data and put it in Excel or look at it yourself some more, you can do that. The system has been improved for mobile devices. So if you're using a mobile device, hopefully the system is more responsive now. And then there's some more information about something called ESSO, which is the state accountability system. So a little bit more information about how much funds schools might be getting if they're struggling, because schools get some additional funds if they need some additional support. And then there's some ability to print report cards and also some training videos. Lots more too. And we'll see some of these things as we go through it. Okay, so let me go ahead and we're going to jump over to a live demo. So I'm going to exit the screen, power the slideshow for a minute, and then we're going to toggle over to iReport. And I will go ahead, I was actually in it, but let me just, for the sake of this presentation, I'm going to go back to the main home page. And so this is that first page you land at. And this is where first thing you can do is select the school. One thing I'll point out is if you want to select the school, there's a long list of schools. If you know it's the name of the school, you can type it in right away. So for instance, if I know I think it's called Henry Wilson School in Henry Wilson Elementary School in Manchester, I could just type in HENR and right away it jumps and only shows me those schools. For this presentation, I'm going to clear that out, and we're actually just going to go with the first school alphabetically, A. Crosby Kennett Middle School. So this is a middle school we're going to look at. Don't mean to be picking on them. They're just first in the alphabet, so they're the one we're choosing. When you go in, first thing you do, just as I showed you before, we know here's the school, here's where it's located in the state. You can see information about the total enrollment. As a matter of fact, if you hover over one of those pop-ups that I talked about, so I'm hovering over that field, is the enrollment over the course of the past 3 years. So you can actually see, in this case, it looks like back in 2019, the school is a little bit bigger, 296, and they've lost enrollment over the past 2 years. Now, I should point out that may be COVID related, for example. Many students might have left even if temporarily. So you might see a drop in some schools. Also, the population across the state has been dropping over the past 3 years as well, just as New Hampshire is an aging population within our state. You'll see information about who the principal is. You'll see information about the grades that are in that school. You will also see information, as you can see here on the bottom. I'm going to move my toolbar there. about what percentage of students are economically disadvantaged. So economically disadvantaged students in New Hampshire means students who are eligible for free and reduced lunch. And there's a variety of ways that you can be eligible for that, but it's basically based on your poverty. And so it's an indicator of poverty within the district. And so you can see 40.25% are economically disadvantaged, which is a fairly high percentage compared to many other towns in New Hampshire. But it's an indicator to tell you about that school. If I hover over it, it actually breaks it down by different groups. So and it also shows you longitudinally. So you can actually see you can see all these different demographics, whether students with disabilities or these other things, you can see those broken down longitudinally over time. So for example, you can see students with disability, the school's been averaging about 16%, which is about average for the state. Those are students who are on an IEP, meaning they have some special needs that they need support for. The other thing I should point out while we're on this screen is you will see places where it says star N or NA. Those are indications where there are either no students for that school or there's so few students that we don't want to report it because we want to protect the privacy of those students. So maybe there are, 2 or 3 English language learners and we just want to protect their privacy, so we're not going to report that. Sometimes if you, for example, if you knew there were only 3 students who were limited English proficient, and you also knew that limited proficient students scored this average on their assessment test, then you'd be able to help kind of identify individual student data, and we don't want that to happen. So we do that to protect the privacy of students. You'll also see cases where it says less than 10%, another indicator where we're trying to protect the privacy of students. So we're telling you it's a small number. We're not going to tell you whether it's 9% or 1%, but we're giving you some type of indication there. So that's the first tab. As you can see, there's tabs going all the way across the screen. Each one of these then provides some more detail. If we go to the overview screen, that's going to provide an overview of the next few tabs. So the overview tab page is going to give us some information about achievement, information about the environment, information about educators, and so you can see educators, environment, achievement. So this is an overview, just as it says, of that information. A couple of things to point out is one is you'll see some color coding that is repeated throughout this whole application. So frequently, or not frequently, but occasionally you'll see the colors of blue, gray, and orange. And what those represent is blue represents the top 25%, gray is the middle 50, and orange is the lowest 25. And what that means is for this given school, for example, their math proficiency, there were 22% of their students were proficient on the math test. And I'll explain that in a minute. But what that's saying is of all the schools in the state, they were in the lowest 25% in terms of the percentage of students who are proficient. So, schools that are in the top 25%, might have a math proficiency that's closer to 50 or 60% proficient. The math proficiency, as I mentioned earlier, in this case, it's the 7th and 8th grade, is measured by the state assessment test. So every student in grades 7 and 8 take a test. It's usually in the April timeframe, somewhere between March and May. And they're assessed on math standards and ELA standards. I should say, New Hampshire, typically across the country, is one of the stronger academically performing states. So our students generally are doing very well as compared to other students throughout the country. Within New Hampshire, we have a fairly high bar for the level of rigor and expertise we expect students to learn in both ELA and math. And so the assessment reflects that. And so it's, it can be challenging for some students, but you'll see many schools, the students are able to do very well. In some schools, they're, looking for ways to help improve the students' performance. So one thing, so there's student achievement, you'll see educator profile. So here, this is saying that, teacher salary, so $49,000. So this is saying the average teacher salary is $49,000, and that's in the lowest 25%, meaning that the lowest 25% of salaries across the state, if you're looking at all the schools in the state, is, that falls within that group. So these numbers don't necessarily, the colors aren't supposed to reflect whether it's good or bad. That in large part is in the eye of the beholder. If I am a taxpayer without kids in the school, I may say low teacher salary is a good thing. If I'm a parent, a mom or dad in school, and I feel like my teachers aren't being compensated enough for the work they're doing, then I might think that's too low. So it all really depends on kind of your own perspective. But these do give you that indication of, are they the lowest, middle, or upper 25%. You'll also see sometimes a star CS. That means that this information is not yet reported or not yet ready to be displayed. So that means coming soon. And that information should be coming soon. If you, for example, if we're hovering over this, we can see that we have 2019 data, we've got 2020 data. We don't yet have 2021 data, but it'll be coming soon. COVID means that you won't have data because we didn't take we didn't collect that information this year. And so we're not going to be able to report it. That in this case, it's because the academic assessment data didn't exist for 2020. And so we're not able to determine this thing called growth for 2021. The other thing I should point out I didn't mention earlier is that school year I'm just talking about, 2021, is up in the right-hand corner. So right now we're looking at how the schools performed in the 2020 to 2021 school year. So school year that ended in June of 2021. You can change the year. So you can go back and look at prior years if you want as well. Okay, let me keep going. Achievement. So the next tab is achievement. So this is going to take that student achievement where it said like 44% of students were proficient in English language arts. This is going to take that information and it's going to give us a little bit more information about that. So right at the top, we see that same thing, 44%. But now we see more information. We see, for example, of those 44% that were deemed proficient, how did that break out? And in fact, the state assessment test actually identifies students at 4 levels. You can be level 1, which is the lowest. It means you're really struggling. Level 2 means you're struggling, you're getting close to proficiency, but you still are a little bit behind in terms of what needs to be learned for that grade. Level 3 means you're proficient, you've met the standards of what we think you need to learn for that grade. And level 4 means you're even beyond that. You really got a strong command. So this 44% of people who are not proficient is really a combination of level 1 and level 2 being not proficient. So 27 plus 29, but that's not right. So what am I doing wrong? I'll have to come back and figure out why those two numbers aren't ending up to 44 because they should. Oh, I'm so sorry. This is percent proficient. So it's 44% of the kids are proficient. So really what that means is these two numbers. So it's 27 plus 29, which is 56%. That's the kids who are not proficient. So 100 minus 56 gives us the 44% kids who are not proficient. So that hopefully that didn't confuse you too much, but these are kids who are not proficient. It's hard here because we're seeing less than 10. And this is one of those things, and because somebody may ask it, although we're saying less than 10, you could actually figure out this number, but it's part of the way we what's called the words escaping me, but filter the information. The other thing I should point out is these colors matter too. So red always means English language arts, blue means math, and green means science. So you've seen those same colors over here, red, blue, and green, same over here. This is English language arts, and blue is math. The screens are typically, like we're seeing here for achievement, you'll see the same for environment, education, and finance. The screens are typically broken up into some basic information, some information that drills down and gives you a little bit more detail, some information that gives it to you in context. So what context means, how's your school doing versus your district versus your state. And so here you can see this is the yellow bar, that's the percent students proficient at the school. The blue is how the district is doing a little better, and this is where the state average is. The other thing I'll point out is that you'll see these flyouts, these arrows. So if you click on one of these arrows, it'll do just what I said. You'll see a little flyout, so a little screen that pops up to your right, flies out. And this is information that then breaks down this 44% and breaks it down by groups. So how is your English language proficiency look for your kids who are economically disadvantaged, or kids who are kind of struggling financially in their households? How are students with disabilities doing? So only 14% of students who have disabilities are proficient in English language arts. How are they doing based on race? How are they doing by grade? So you can see, example, in this case, 49% of your 7th graders were proficient and 38% of your 8th graders. So there was quite a bit of drop. So, maybe there's something going on between 7th and 8th grade, and that might be something that, the school principal may want to look at. Once you have something flies out, you have to click on the arrow a second time to shrink that and remove it. So remember that. Click once to fly out, click a second time to pull it back. Okay, I think I should move on in interest of time. Lauren, let me know if there's anything I missed, but otherwise I'll move on to environment.
I think we can move on. No questions.
So environment, just like we saw in achievement, there's some general environment information. There's some information that breaks it down in context, so state, district, and school. There's information that shows you longitudinally over 3 years. It's the same kind of format that we saw with the achievement. For environment, so the school environment, what we're collecting, what we're sharing with you is suspension information. So what percentage of students are suspended, either in school or out of school, and then also expulsion. And then we also will see average class size. So what's the average number of students in each class? This information in New Hampshire, you'll see is very low, right? And which is good, right? We've got a very low number of students suspended in general, but you'll see differences. Some schools will have a higher suspension rate than others. The other thing that you'll notice is interesting here. So if you look at school environment over time, the number of suspensions here in school suspensions has dropped over the past 2 years. This you'll find actually is common, and it's a theme across the state, as you may realize or guess, in part because of COVID with a lot of the virtual instruction. It meant that a lot of students were taking school classes at home. There might have been smaller classes. Maybe they were on a hybrid schedule where half the students came in one day and half came in the other day, and that created maybe for less behavior issues within the school. So that was a trend that we saw over the past few years, and it's something that I know a lot of teachers and principals are working on right now to try to keep the behavior and keep the students focused now that many of them are back in school. Most of them are back in school. I think that's probably it for this screen. If I go to educator, we'll see another similar just to achievement and environment. We'll see a similar environment where we have some overall indicators, some information longitudinally, and some information in context. So again, the information we have about educators includes the percentage of classes that are taught by educators who are certified in the area they're teaching. In New Hampshire, you'll find occasionally there are some teachers who may not be certified in everything they're teaching. You don't have to be certified in every class. You have to be certified in the majority of the classes you're teaching, but there are occasions, for example, where you might be teaching chemistry and you're certified in chemistry for 3 or 4 classes a day, but you're also teaching 1 class of biology. You've got a good command of science, but you may not actually be certified in biology. That's okay. But it's an indication, that somebody, that you can look at. So that gives you the percentages of teachers that have classes that are actually taught by people certified in the area. There are also the classes taught by educators who are on an intern license. In New Hampshire, you have the ability to become a teacher through what's called an intern license, where you're kind of being mentored by a teacher within a school as you're learning to become a teacher as well. So you're in a mentoring situation. You're on a specific plan that has been defined between your mentor and usually the principal and yourself, and you are teaching a class as part of that process. So this gives you the percentage of students who are on percentage of classes that are being taught by somebody on an intern license. And then finally, classes taught by experienced educators. Typically, if you've been teaching for at least 3 years in New Hampshire and you're an effective teacher, you're identified as an experienced teacher. And so this shows you what percentage of the teachers in that school are experienced. As I mentioned before, you can see this in context. So you can see, overall, what's the district look versus the school versus the state. And then another thing I mentioned before is you can jump between iReport, which we're looking at now, and iExplore. So here's an example where you'll see this arrow. Whenever you see an arrow going up or down, that lets you indicate that you're going to jump between the two. So maybe you want to look at percentage of teachers, taught by experienced educators. So here is, 40% in this district or this school. How does that compare across the state? So if I click on this link, it's going to open up a new tab, and that tab's going to bring me right into iExplore. So I still have this iReport open that we're looking at before, but now we have this new tab for iExplore, and it's bringing up this list of what we're seeing here is classes by certified educators. These are the percentage of classes across, every school in the state or every district. You can look at districts or schools. We're here looking at schools, and you can see, and districts maybe. You can see the percentage of teachers that are certified. So some, here you've got a school district in Jackson, 100% of teachers, are experienced. Oh, I'm sorry, these are teachers taught who are certified in the area they're teaching. Other places it might be a little bit lower, like 89% or 80%. So anyway, a good way to look across the state. So that's educator information. The next item we'll look at is finance. So now we're looking at finance data for the Kennett Middle School. So one of the things I didn't mention before, but I should have, and I'll do it now, is that some of this information is different if you're looking at a school or a district. So here, for example, we don't see any information. Well, two reasons. One, because it says coming soon. So I should pull back to a different year. Let's pull back to 2019. So we're not seeing finance information because we don't have it for this year. But the other thing is that some of this information is not at the school level. It's only at the district level. So we're seeing some very basic information at the school level. What percentage of funds are state funds versus federal funds? But if we go to the district, so if we go up to the school list here, we can switch to the district. And if we choose the Conway district, we'll see for this tab about finance, we'll see a lot more information. So for some of these tabs, you'll see more information at the district level than you will, I got to click it again to close it, than you do at the school level. So here for finance, at the district level, now we're seeing a lot more information. How much at the district level is spent on pupil transportation? How much is spent on food services? So you can get an idea. And again, this is something you can look at districts across the state to get an idea of how does your district compare to another district across the state. Also some revenue information as well. The other thing I wanted to point out is that some information only exists again at the district or at certain school levels, like college. You won't see college information at a K-5 school. Doesn't make sense. It's only a K-5 school. They don't got kids getting ready for college. You will see this at a high school because it'll give you information about kids who move on to college and high school. So if I'm looking at Conway District, let's jump to college for now. This will give you information just like we saw for educator or for environment. It'll give you information about students enrollment in college. And so here you can look at what percentage of students are graduating from school, what percentage of students are enrolling in college. And so another great way to kind of get some indicators. You'll see across New Hampshire, again, New Hampshire does a great job at helping kids get their high school diploma. So most high schools have a very high graduation rate. You know, one thing I didn't mention, well, a couple of things is there is help at the top of every screen. So if you're not sure what college information is about, I encourage you to read the top of the screen, and it tells you information about what you're seeing here. The other thing I should point out is there's these little information icons. So if you click on the information icon, it'll give you some more information. So for example, what is the 4-year graduation rate? What is a 5-year graduation rate? So it helps define what these different things are. So I encourage you to click around at these help things to find out some more help about what you're looking at if you're not sure. So again, you have that information in context. You have it over years. So how did the 4-year graduation rate compare from year to year? It looks like they're fairly consistent, about 95, 96. So good information looking at it longitudinally. There's also something called growth. Growth is something that I do encourage you to look at. The growth indicator is an indicator of how are students growing in terms of their math and English language arts, their math and their English learning. How are they growing compared to students who are similar performers around the state? So you may have a school that's performing very well. Maybe you've got a lot of kids who are very strong academically. But this lets you look at how they're growing, even though they're already doing pretty well. How are they growing compared to other kids in the state who are also very strong academically? So it's an indicator of growth that allows you to look, regardless of how your students are performing, struggling or doing well, how are they doing compared to other similar students around the state? A growth percentile of 50 means that they're doing about average compared to similar kids around the state. A number below 50 means that they're not growing. They're not, their growth from one year to the next is not doing quite as well as other kids in the state. So ideally, you're looking for a growth factor that's higher than 50. But relatively in the school, you can see, students with disabilities are growing. Their growth rate is 39%. That's lower than you're hoping, but it gives you that growth information about students, both at overall district level or at a school level, if I was looking at a school, as well as information about the subgroups, about the different groups of kids within that school. Again, you'll see quite frequently they might see NA or because there's not enough kids for you to provide that information to you. The other thing I should mention is growth, because we need 2 years of data to see growth. So we have to see how did somebody do in 3rd grade, how did they do in 4th grade compared to kids who did similar in 3rd grade. So we have to have 2 years of achievement data. So you're only going to see growth for schools that have students in grades 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So you won't see growth information for high school students. You won't see growth information for a school that's a K-3 school, for example, an elementary school only going through grades 3. There's also ability to compare, so you can, I won't walk you through. So, and then I'm sorry, the last thing I missed was something called ESSA and IDA. I'm not going to go through details in these, but click on these as well. ESSA is some information about school accountability. It tells you if overall the school is in good standing or if it's a school that's struggling a little bit overall, looking across many of these indicators. IDA is something that's used for special education students. So if you've got a special education student, you're interested in the special education student population, you can click on IDEA, and those are a series of what's called indicators. They're federal indicators, characteristics about those that group of students that has to be reported to the federal government. So you can get information about IDEA. Again, all this information we're talking about is aggregate. It's not student level, so we're maintaining the privacy of individual students. You can compare schools. So as I started to mention, I can compare one high school to another high school. So I could select Campbell High School, and I could compare them to, maybe something like Berlin High School or Bow High School, and then I could look at one school across their characteristics, all the different characteristics, whether it's student achievement, academics, growth, etc. We can look at one school compared to the other. I might want to change this back to the current year just so I could see current year data. You can look at a school versus a district. So a lot of different things. The other thing, I'm not sure, let's just check if you can look at the state. We haven't talked about it before, but you might want to look at how students are doing across all these indicators compared to the state. So if I just scroll down here, you'll see their state of New Hampshire. So you could use this compare tool. Now I can compare Campbell High School to Bow High School to the entire state and get a comparison across those items. Finally, the last thing I want to point out is download. So there's a nice ability here to download the data. So if you want to report for a given school, for the Conway district or a given Portsmouth High School, you can find that high school and then click that report button. And then you can actually print what's called a summary report card or a detailed report card. And this is actually a nice PDF, a nice one-page document, or might be a couple of page document that tells you the information about that school. And it's an easy way to print it all out. So here's the profile of that school. It shows you the enrollment over time, shows you the general information about percentage of students proficient, gender breakup, everything that's in the system. Okay, so that was a whirlwind tour of iReport. Hopefully it gave you an idea of how to get into the tool and look through it a little bit. What I want to do now is we're going to go back if we look, for example, if we go to education, if I Google, I'll just do it, iPlatform NH. This brings me, iPlatform NH. This brings me right to the New Hampshire's website where you've got iPlatform. So now what we're going to do is rather than looking at iReport, we're going to go ahead and look at iExplore. I'm going to toggle back over to here where I'm giving you this live presentation. We're going to go to this tab, which is iExplore, and this brings you to iExplore. iExplore has 6 tabs. And so these tabs, similar to iReport, give you some different information on each tab. The first one lets you explore, just as I mentioned before. And so I can take any factor. So right now, let's take a factor like average cost per pupil. So this tells you how much does the school, and remember I mentioned we don't have that data for 2021, so let me go back to 2019, just because I know we've got data back there. And this gives you what's the average cost per pupil at each one of the districts in the state. So a nice way to look at them across the entire state. The other thing you'll see on this is a comparison of whatever indicator you're looking at. So cost per pupil for here, for example, is on the y-axis. Whatever you select here will be on the y-axis. On the x-axis is always going to be your average proficiency of your students in math and English. So what percentage of students are proficient on average between math and English? And each one of these dots then represents one of these districts or schools. And so this school, for example, let's find one here. So this one down here is a school that almost 80% of their students are proficient in math and ELA. And they are also, this is Bedford, this district of Bedford. So 78% of their students are proficient. And they also have a very low cost per pupil. So somehow they're able to have a low cost per pupil, $13,900, and a high percentage of students are proficient. So, just a good way to kind of get that comparison. What we're seeing here is all the schools compared their cost versus their percent of students proficient. And you can look for a correlation. And what we're finding here, there's something called the R value, Pearson R value. Because the R value has to be fairly high, almost 0.8 like 80 point, 0.8. This is only 0.1, 0.19. So a low R value means there's no correlation. So we're not seeing, at least in our population of schools in New Hampshire, we're not seeing a correlation between percent of students proficient and how much it costs per pupil. So for example, you'll see here where 80% of the kids are proficient here. We've also got 80% of the kids proficient, with a higher cost. So it doesn't seem like cost is directly correlating to what percentage of students are proficient. So you can pick any indicator and see that information. You pick a different indicator like class size, and you'll see the same type of information here. Again, class size doesn't seem to be related, showing any correlation to proficiency. Compare is a tool that lets you compare similar to what we saw before. It lets you compare multiple districts and let you look at all their indicators. So it's very similar to the compare that we saw in iReport. So I'm not going to really spend any more time on that. Discover. Discover is a tool that lets you look at any two indicators. So maybe I'm not concerned about proficiency per se. I want to look at something else. Maybe I want to look at an indicator, for instance, of class size. So class size, I believe, is a school environment indicator. And so I click on school environment. It'll show me those indicators, and I see average class size. And maybe I want to compare class size to the indicator of a financial indicator to cost per pupil. So is it more expensive per pupil when the class sizes are smaller? And so let's see what we find. So cost per pupil. So if I shrink these up, now we're seeing a relationship between average cost per pupil and average class size. And here we see that the R value is 0.55. So that means there is some relation. It's a moderate. 0.55 is a very moderate relationship. Again, you want 0.8 or something to really indicate a significant relationship. But there is some relationship that we do see that it seems as, this higher the class size, it seems the cost is going down. And, that's what you might expect, right? Smaller, more kids in the class, less teachers, lower costs per pupil. But again, we saw before that doesn't necessarily mean that's any correlation to the achievement of students. But what this lets you do is look at it, any indicators across the state. This is a fun tool to play with and look for correlations. You can also zero in on certain areas within the state. So for example, maybe I only want to look at the North Country and see all the students, all the schools in the North Country of New Hampshire. So you'll see a lot less dots, and we can see where they land up. Again, you can hover over a dot to see which school or district this dot is representing. Taking a second to load here. And so you can look at individual schools. So this is Groveton Elementary School. The next option here is search. Search is one of my favorite tools to explore schools in New Hampshire. So I highly recommend you trying out search in the iExplore tool. Search lets you take different indicators. So for example, maybe I am concerned about or interested in looking at the percentage of students who are proficient in, let's say in math. So I choose that. And now what we're seeing is every school in the state, and I can either look at schools or districts. Right now we're looking at districts, but click here and now we'll look at schools. So this is going to recalculate, and it's going to show us all the schools in the state. And it'll show us for each school in the state what percentage of the students were proficient. And so, here we see in the Academy for Science and Design, whatever year we're looking, more than 90% of their students were proficient. So a very high percentage of students proficient. The thing this allows me to do, though, is now select other indicators. Maybe I'm interested in schools that have a high percentage of students who are economically disadvantaged. So schools where there's some high poverty areas. So I can do this, and now I can see the poverty rates as well for these. So these are all orange. So remember, orange means you're the lowest poverty, the lowest quartile of poverty in the state. So they don't have, don't have a large proportion of students who are living in poverty. Maybe I also am concerned about the size of the school. So maybe the class enrollment. So students, where is this? Total enrollment. So total enrollment. So how many students are in the school? So again, Hollis Primary School, they've got a large percentage of students proficient. They also have a large number of students, 346. So it gives you the school enrollment. And then maybe I could pick another indicator, anything you might be interested in. Maybe it's, classes of experienced educators. Maybe you're interested in that. What this tool now lets me do is zero in on certain types of schools. So for example, as I mentioned earlier, maybe I'm only interested in schools that have a high percentage of students who are economically disadvantaged. So I can take this and I can actually slide it to wherever I want. And I can say, for example, I only want schools that have at least 40% of their students, so between 40 and 90% of their students are economically disadvantaged. So these are schools that have a high percentage of students who are economically disadvantaged. So here I see a school, Ackworth Elementary. They've got a very high percentage, fairly high percentage of students are proficient. They also have a fairly high poverty rate. But I also noticed that they don't have, they've got a fairly small school. And, still wonderful that they're doing a great job. But maybe I'm interested in looking at schools that are a little larger in size. So I could, I could slide this, or I can actually just type in 100. And so now I'm going to only look at schools with at least 100 students who are enrolled. And so here now, again, I'm seeing schools with high percentage of poverty, large number of students. And now I can look and say, okay, here's a school. Maybe these are the schools I'm interested in. They're doing fairly well with the percentage of students who are proficient. They also have a high percentage of students in poverty. And they have a fairly large number of students. And those are schools that maybe, I'm a parent, and I want to look at these different schools to see where I'm at when I send my child. Maybe I am a school board member and I'm looking for schools that are similar to mine in terms of these indicators, and I want to contact them and find out what they're doing and learn from them. So different ways you can use this information. Anyway, that's search. It's a good option. I recommend you taking a look at it. Download data lets you download data to your computer. So similar to the download before, but this actually gives you an Excel file or a CSV file that you can open in Excel or Google Sheets, whatever you use. So this lets you download across multiple years any indicator. So here I'm looking at average class size. We're seeing the average class size for every school in the state. And you can download every school or district, and you can download that information. You could say, maybe I only am interested in schools, not districts. There are multiple schools within a district. Maybe I'm only interested in elementary schools. So I can uncheck that, check elementaries, click apply. Now I'm looking at just schools that are elementaries, and then I can click download and download that data. The last thing I want to do is click on definitions, and this is just another great place, in addition to the help that we saw before, where you might click on an eye to get more help, or you might read text that's on the screen. The definitions page lets you find out more definitions about the different types of data that's being displayed. So whether it's average class size or information about average cost per pupil, and if you click on this, it'll actually, you can expand it, and it'll actually bring you to what's called a data dictionary that describes how that information is collected and what it represents. Maybe when it's collected, different information about that. So a good tool to find out a little bit more about what the data means that you're looking at through the system. Okay, so I think that's probably enough to hopefully get you started on both iExplore and iReport. Lauren, please chime in if there's anything I missed. But the other thing I will do is I will go ahead and go back to the slideshow, and I just want to walk you through a couple more slides just to tell you a little bit more about what might be coming, and see if there's anything else I missed. So if I start the slideshow again, the last couple of things I want to point out is, well, this actually is a description within the slideshow of some of the things I demonstrated to you. So I encourage you, if you can again access this presentation, feel free to read through these next slides and go to the different pages and look for the things that we talked about. But some of those things we looked at are listed here. These are some demos and some scenarios that you can take a look at yourself. So I encourage you, these are kind of little exercises that you might go through and see if you can find out where that information is in iReport or iExplore. But these are different kind of questions that you can answer using iExplore or iReport. So, I understand my school switched math programs a few years ago, and I want to see how my math performance has changed over the past 3 years. Go to iReport and you can find that. So I encourage you to take a look at these different items. Some helpful hints. So things that we talked about, click on that question mark to find out more information. Hover over things and you'll find information about some longitudinal data. Don't forget, you can download, click download an iReport and you get a report card. So it's just some helpful hints that you might want to consider. Don't forget the Pearson R value. So if you're looking at correlations, remember, you've got to look at that R value to see whether it really means anything. And you can Google Pearson R value and you'll get tons of information if you're questioning, want more questions about what those numbers mean. Finally, coming forward in February of this year, so next month, coming up soon. We will have financial and post-secondary data. So some of that data said CS coming soon. That data should be reported in the next month or so. There's some IDA, so the information about special education students, that'll be coming out in April. And then there'll be some additional dashboard information allowing you some more indicators about student performance coming up in June. So expect all that information coming out. One of the nice things coming up, this grade to grade proficiency context, you'll actually be able to see how your school did in a given grade compared to the entire state. You can get that now by looking at the state, but this will be an easier way to do it. And then please know there's some upcoming training. So in addition to the training we're doing today, if you are interested and want to go to another one, there's some other trainings coming up. We'll be going into a little bit more depth in some of these as well. So I think that's it. Here's our contact information. So I will leave that up for a minute in case you want to write it down, but please reach out to Lauren or myself, Dina as well. There is a help desk. The department really appreciates it if you can go use this help desk so that they can kind of log the questions that come in and get a better idea of some of the feedback. So I encourage you to use this help desk as well. Again, if you download this PowerPoint, you can click right on that. But we don't want you to struggle. So we hope we know there's lots of good information out here. In iPlatform, we know that it can be a little bit confusing when you first get into it because there's so much data. But we don't want you to struggle. So please reach out to us, and we can hopefully give you a quick answer. I know that there might have been some questions. I think there was a question up front about student languages that are spoken in different schools in the state. There is some information, and I'll just point out real briefly before we sign off. In iReport under achievement, there is some information not about languages spoken, but there is some information I should have pointed out earlier about limited English proficient students. It's coming soon. It's not here, although I might be looking at a prior year. But there is information down here about how students who English is not their first language, how are they performing, or how are they getting proficient in English? So you can look at what percentage of students are on track to learn English for those students if that's not their primary language. The state does have information about the different languages spoken in each school district. So I will see if we can get that added to this. I think that was a great idea that somebody asked about. So I will see if we can get that added to iReport as well. So with that, thank you all very much for attending. Lauren, thank you for helping facilitate as well.
Great job.
Okay. And we wish you all a wonderful rest of the day and evening, and we'll look forward to any questions that you might have for us in the future. So please reach out. Thank you.